6 strategies. But are there 6 countermeasures? Yes, the United States is gearing up for what may be the most important campaign of the Iran war, the battle to control the Strait of Hormuz. At stake, 20% of the world's oil, stable consumer prices, and the Trump administration's desire to avoid having to pursue a quick end to the war. The metric of success? Convincing civilian tankers that transiting the strait is safe enough that the elevated sale prices of barrels of crude are worth pursuing. So today, we look at 6 options that Iran may try to use to keep the strait on lockdown. Missiles, Shahed drones, quadcopter drones, speedboats, naval drones, and mines. Along with each, we will investigate what the United States can do to counteract that particular measure. That will give us an idea of what to watch for as the battle commences. But we need to start with an overview of the feasibility of convincing ships to transit the strait at all. As a high-level answer, yes, ships will be willing to, so long as they believe that it is sufficiently safe to do so. There is just too much money on the line not to. Actually, we are already seeing this. The strait is not closed. It is closed. About 2 tankers and 3 other cargo ships transited the strait per day over the first 2 weeks of the war. This is significantly down from the 50 and 45 vessels per day under normal circumstances. But the point is that there is motion. Those that went likely had the thumbs up from Iran, which sounds comforting, but still puts each of those captains in the position of getting accidentally hit anyway. Again, though, there is too much money at stake for them to not take the risk, if they think they are sufficiently safe. The rest of the ships are waiting for a real plan of action. Insurance is not an issue. Private premiums have soared, but the White House is willing to step in. Instead, the necessary plan of action falls to the military. And we have seen that once a plan is in place, ships have indeed continued with business as, well, kind of usual. During the Iran-Iraq War, Iran began targeting ships in the Gulf. The United States stepped in to provide escorts for ships transiting the Gulf, and thus the oil remained flowing. 2 barriers stand in the way today. One is having sufficient escort vessels. This is partly a mobilization question for the United States, and partly a political question of having international partners contribute to the operation. I will save further discussion of this for another time, because, like all politics, it is a mess right now. The other half is causing sufficient damage to Iran that both the escorts and commercial vessels believe the operation is safe enough to execute. It is no longer the 1980s. Technology has changed, and the military threats that Iran can deploy have evolved. Hence, we need to go through the list of risks. One final high-level point here. The USS Gerald R. Ford is in retreat. Its deployment has long exceeded the standard duration for aircraft carriers, a product of being the one available to visit Venezuela, and then being the one available to return to the Middle East. Its crew was exhausted, and its bathrooms were, not reliable. The final straw was a fire breaking out in the laundry room. The point is, the single greatest U.S. asset in the region has to return to a base for repairs. Next up will be the George H.W. Bush, which is certified ready for combat, but its deployment schedule is unclear. That could slow down the U.S. military's ability to handle the threats Iran can deploy across the strait. With that, let's go to the first such threat: missiles fired directly at a transiting vessel. This would appear to be the most dangerous possibility, but Iran will run into problems here at both a higher and a lower level. At the higher level, one of the main U.S. priorities from the start of the war has been to degrade Iran's missile capabilities by bombing any known launcher. That plan has seemed to work. Here is what Iran's daily missile launches have looked like. A ton on day 1, but then a sharp drop-off. Now, there were some questions about whether this was because Iran was trying to keep a large reserve for later, and I am sure that there is still a small element of truth to that. But the bigger problem that Iran has is that if you keep them tucked away, the United States may very well destroy them before you get a chance to use them. I think what happened on Wednesday is instructive. Israel struck the South Pars gas field, no relation to South Park. I will leave questions about what Israel's strategy was here for another time. But South Pars is a top-tier Iranian economic asset, the largest natural gas field in the world. It is the type of thing that you would want to retaliate against to deter Israel from trying again. And indeed, Iran retaliated, with about 30 more missiles than usual, and no continuation the day after. Sorry that it is hard to see in this graph, but the best data that I could find only gives us a 3-day moving average. Point is, yes, Iran appears to be keeping something in reserve. It is just not that much. However, the question of anti-ship missile stocks is less clear. These targets would be a tertiary priority for the United States, following anti-aircraft systems, and then the aforementioned missiles intended to target land-based assets. CENTCOM only recently announced a dedicated strike against such targets. We also do not get the benefit of seeing launch data because Iran has not activated this part of its war effort. On the lower level, actually using them will cause an immediate problem for Iran. Missiles light up radars, and when the United States constantly has patrol aircraft in the skies, a reply may come in short order. Iran tries to counter this by putting missile launchers on the back of a truck, basically utilizing the same scoot-and-shoot technique as HIMARS. But that plan works a lot better when no US asset is waiting to rain down missiles. This is not a situation like Russia, way on the other side of a front line, taking forever to deliver the response. Overall, the missile vector is one to keep an eye on. Iran may indeed have some short-term success firing them before losing its launchers. The key is whether the escort vessel's standard interception packages will be enough, and, on the Iranian side, whether there is an infinite supply of launchers. The second system to explore is Shahed drones. Shaheds are supposed to be Iran's magic bullet for everything, so I guess this is game over for the United States. Or we have a rant from me incoming. I know that some Shaheds can fly at 60,000 feet, but let's come back down to Earth for a second. I feel like we have to have this conversation every 3 months, but here we go again in a different context. I see a bunch of discussion on social media that the United States is using $1 million Patriot interceptors to take down Shaheds priced in the tens of thousands. So, inevitably, the United States is going to lose this battle. Everything about this argument is wrong. Everything. The conclusion is wrong because the United States is rich and Iran is not. So you could let Iran get away with the massive disparity in cost ratio if you wanted to, and still be okay, even if it would be incredibly stupid to do so. The substantive implication of the argument is not only wrong, it is impossible. Contrary to what Trump has said, the United States does not have virtually unlimited interceptors. There may have been about 1,000 Patriot missiles available at the start of the war. Iran has in the high tens of thousands of Shaheds. Within the first 3 days, Iran had fired more Shaheds than the United States has Patriots. Even if the money were meaningless, the math on that does not math. It was not physically possible for the United States to intercept Shaheds in this manner. But most importantly, the premise of the argument is wrong. The United States does not, in fact, use Patriots to shoot down Shaheds. Not regularly, anyway. Maybe a few have been shot down in that way in emergency situations, but those are the exceptions. You see, Shaheds are slow and dumb. No shade. They are intended to be that way so they can be cost-effective, and there is a reason that the United States has copied the design. Nonetheless, Shaheds being slow and dumb, you can just send F-35s out to intercept them. This would almost certainly be a part of the U.S. escort strategy, just as it has been a part of the U.S. Shahed interception strategy so far. And there are other options available that are even cheaper and can loiter longer in the sky, but let's save discussion of that platform for another target. Those are only the beginning of Iran's problems if it tries using Shaheds. Standard Shaheds use GPS targeting and are not very accurate even when given good coordinates. Ships are moving targets, though. It is a safe bet that the escorts would travel along the far side of the strait. Even if Iran could somehow launch a Shahed right from the coast, it would take 12 minutes to reach across the narrowest point of the strait. Good luck guessing exactly where a moving ship will be 12 minutes from now. Of course, as the Shaheds cross, they will be subject to jamming. The standard solution for that is to include AI terrain matching navigation. That works a lot better when there is, actual terrain and not a whole bunch of water. On the other hand, that AI guidance might help with locking onto a vessel once GPS puts it in the general vicinity of the target. So one open question is how much Russia, which has been working on that sort of thing, is returning the assistance to Iran. Either way, Shaheds are still slow, and they are still easy targets for the aerial escorts presumably patrolling the strait. All told, Iran would be better off saving Shaheds to swarm land-based targets. Therefore, this one is a low overall concern. How about a second type of drone? The good old-fashioned quadcopter. On paper, this could work, even if they do not deal as much damage as a Shahed. We know that Ukraine, or someone, who knows, it is a complete mystery, has done this with a handful of Russian Shadow Fleet targets. The key difference there will be the presence of US escorts. The Russian Navy does not have a vessel tracking every member of its Shadow Fleet. In contrast, the Gulf is small enough for the United States to properly convoy everything. And that is good news for the United States, because jamming here is likely enough to dispatch the quadcopters. The standard strategy on land to counter jammers or GPS spoofers is to send fiber optic drones to hit the jammers or spoofers first. That will not work at sea, where the distance is too great for the cables to extend. I will add that there is likely a ton of room for innovation in this space, so do not count out the quadcopters. Just do not think that this is going to resemble a Ukrainian battlefield. Switching to sea-based vectors, how about speedboats? There is a perception that this is a fundamental weakness of not only tankers, but also the US Navy itself. The evidence is the US Cole incident. A single speedboat put one large hole into the side of the Cole, killing 17. It would therefore be open season along Hormuz. But let's not extrapolate military strategy from a single incident a quarter century ago. The Cole got hit because the US Navy had strict rules of engagement back then, and the crew of the Cole essentially let the speedboat drive right up to the hull. In response to the incident, the US Navy updated its rules of engagement. And certainly in the middle of a combat zone, any speedboat anywhere near a convoy will be treated as an enemy combatant. Swarms of them may move fast, but they are not going to outrun guns. The United States has also deployed A-10 Warthogs to shoot speedboats from the sky. If modern problems require modern solutions, then ancient problems require ancient and more cost-effective solutions. Thus, speedboats fall low on the hierarchy of danger as well. Returning to drones one last time, let's put them in or under the ocean. In the ocean starts to sound a lot like speedboats again. Anything that gets close would immediately be put under fire. The difference here is that swarming drones is a much better idea than swarming speedboats. The latter would result in a whole bunch of dead operatives. The former might result in a bunch of wasted materiel, but perhaps one breaking through and dealing significant damage. Undersea drones are a bigger concern, and we are having to stick to the drones as we plunge underwater, because the United States claims to have destroyed the entirety of Iran's traditional submarine fleet. Here you must hope that the sonar is working well, and accept that the cost per interceptor will be higher. But conditional on those factors, you might end up avoiding looking like one of these Russian vessels. However, this is another one of those fields where Iran's capacity is opaque. It took Ukraine years to work on this type of technology. If Iran was not preparing for this day back in 2023, it will not be able to conjure the ability out of thin air. Last up is mines. We have discussed the practical problem Iran faces if it does this, and we have also discussed how the United States left its mine clearance capacity to rust after the Cold War ends. Well, if Iran began laying down a minefield, you would need to have sweepers go through there before advancing with a convoy plan. That is something for Tehran to keep in mind if it wants to halt this process. Then we would have an awkward period where the United States tries deploying the demining assets that it does own, hopefully having quickly destroyed Iran's mine layers to prevent this from being a bigger problem. Or a bigger problem indeed emerges, and we get to eat some popcorn while watching what kind of concessions Europe can extract out of the White House in exchange for assistance. Either way, I do not view this as much of a direct concern for the tankers once they are in the convoy. They will know whether it is safe to cross or not. It will not be a gamble like trying to run the strait in the presence of the other 5 problems, but it could delay this process indefinitely. Meanwhile, you do not have to wait indefinitely to watch my next video. I did a Q&A over on Lines on Maps Extra a couple of days ago. Check it out here. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.